Hello. I'm going to string together a ton of videos that I made whilst building this. I cover the same thing multiple times, so yeah, it's not particularly professionally produced. I'm pretty sure I got some of the videos out of order, but hopefully people who want to build one of these will find it interesting enough to sit through the 15 minutes it goes for. Kept on tape, very sticky, very heat resistant, like 300 degrees or something. Big bag of nuts, bolts, washers and stuff. M3. Straight rod, stainless steel, very straight. Threaded rod, not as straight, still pretty straight. There's also some more straight rod inside there. Bearings, 2 608 bearings and a ton of smaller bearings that I can't remember, they're like 624s or something. Synchro-flex belt. I'm probably not going to end up using this, or at least all of this. I found some belt that suits my steppers without having to remove the stock put already on there. Big roll of polylactic acid thermoplastic stuff. Blue colour. Translucent blue to be exact. And the misters. Mr. Goodness. Let me get one out of a packet. See that there? You probably can't, but I can. Let's see if I can get it to focus. No, but basically that little blob on the end of that copper wire there is about the size of 2 grains of sand stacked together. And that can sense temperatures and stuff. Oh, no, shit. Sweet! My 3D printer is going to be done at some point in finite time. X carriage. Slides along. Let's give me another one. Here. Whoa! Here. 2 parallel bars. Those along those bearings there. An extruder goes here. Extruder nozzle pipes through there. Super handy dandy thing to have when building stuff out of printed parts is one of these little miniature screw drill widgets. Because a lot of the holes in the printed parts don't come out perfect. They need to be sort of screwed or cleaned up with a drill bit or something. But with this, you just slot it straight on and then just drill your screw through and it clears out the holes automatically. So if I was to go like, it's probably going to be an extremely bad idea, but if I was to drill like so, let's actually set it to the direction, let's actually set it to the right direction, and drill, and it just clears out the holes automatically. Look at that. Coming straight through. That's not what it's designed for. One of the X-axis end widgets. There. There's the printer. The parent printer. The parent of my child. Printing some more parts for what goes under there. And now I've made the left-hand side bit. Goes there. And it slides up and down in the Z-axis direction. And the X-axis comes out of those 2 holes here, which are those 2 parallel straight bars there, along which the X carriage slides. Cool. I have a print ready. Sweet. That's the rest of the bits for under the bed. So I've kind of built enough to show the X-axis. There's the left-hand side, and there's the right-hand side. Hasn't got the motor mount yet, that goes on here. But here's the X carriage. It's belt driven along this axis. As you can see, this belt here wraps around the end there and goes back to the other side. And there's a motor there that has a belt wrapped around the shaft. And that is how this X carriage moves back and forth along here. It's rather clever, the mechanics of the whole lot, because there's a set of 3 bearings here and a set of 2 there. So if you're just relying on the set of 3, the whole thing can sort of pivot about the Z-axis thusly, but it's constrained by these 2 bearings here. And because there's 2 sets of them, one above the other, on both sides, it's also constrained in the rotation about that way axis. So it can't rotate that way, it can't rotate that way, so it's left with rotating this way, which obviously it can't do because there's structure built around it such that it can't rotate that way. And all that's left is translation along that axis, because it can't translate that way or that way. So it's pretty sweet. You get one dimension of motion. It's explained a lot better in the official How the Mendel Axes Work video. And they also do that for the X carriage here. There's a set of 3 on that side and a set of 2 on that side, so it works on a similar principle. One of the first questions I had when I found out about 3D printing printers was that how did you stop inaccuracies in the parent following through to the child? And that's solved by a lot of the things that require great precision, like these bearings here aren't quite biting onto that. There's a bit of a gap in here. That's solved by wherever that sort of situation arises, there's this extra tensioning bolt added, and you can just clamp that bolt down until these bearings pinch down precisely on the rod. That is repeated here. You can tighten up that bolt down here, and that will tighten these bearings up here around the vertical rod, and likewise on the other end. So wherever there's important accuracy, there's scope provided to adjust it very precisely such that errors in your parent don't go through to errors in your child, and you end up with this hideous, mutant, deformed, useless child. Wonderful. Here is the frame. X-axis attached. Up and down the Z. One of the steppers is on there. It's very sturdy. And there's a Nerf gun. Sweet. That's for sure. Alright, I got my belt on my X-axis there. It's very nice. I had to, you can't really see it, but I had to splice together 2 belts there. Lots of faffing about with cotton and small needle. I do not want to do that again. I'm going to have to. Okie dokie. First movement. Watch, watch, watch. Watching, watch. Oh, it's moving! So that's X carriage moving along, driven by the belt, which is driven by the stepper, which is driven through that wire to a Pelulu stepper controller chip, which is being driven via that ribbon cable by this Arduino, and you can see if I press the button you see some lights blink, and then that goes back to the back of the laptop, and his laptop running the reprap host software. As you can see, it's spamming a ton of errors, but no, apparently. Stepper is getting a smidgen warm, that's to be expected. It's locked the carriage in place. There's a bit of give in there now because I haven't tensioned this belt properly, nor have I lined up the bearings properly or anything really. But first motion, happy days, and that's for sure. I've got my Z-axis moving now. It'll be fairly hard to see. It doesn't move very much in one step. So I can move a millimeter now. Just step it down here. Sweet. Alrighty, we have Y-axis movement. I've also got the printed bed, well not the printed bed, but the bed on. It's polycarbonate or acrylic, I don't know which. But I left the paper backing on it because when we print, we put this painter's tape down on top of the bed, and when the extrudent comes out, it adheres to that paper better than it does to straight polycarbonate or acrylic. So I thought instead of putting the tape down, I'll just leave this paper on and see how it goes. Under there's a clear piece of polycarbonate there. To that I've bolted the bearing sets there and there, and then suspended above that squashed frog, which is the polycarbonate, that's what they call it because it looks like a squashed frog, is the bed, which is suspended using some springs such that if the printer head collides with the bed, it's not the end of the world, it doesn't destroy itself. So if I go over here on the software, I click home, it'll drive until it hits the home opto end stop that's at the end there. So now all my axes are in motion. Pretty sweet. Other developments. My little box of stuff here. Aha. This is the nozzle. This white stuff is PTFE or nylon. It's used to keep the hot end separate from the rest of the thing, because if your hot end is hot enough to melt the plastic that your printer is made out of, then obviously you can't hold the hot end with this printed stuff. So you need an intermediary bit of plastic to act as a thermal barrier. The nozzle you see on the end there is a length of threaded rod, M8 I think. It has a 3.5mm hole that runs almost all the way through, and then a 0.4mm hole, you probably can't even see it on this camera, in the end, and that's sort of the hot glue gun aspect of it. And you saw how that's screwed into the PTFE before. The part that protrudes will be wrapped with nickel chromium wire, and we'll have one of those itsy bitsy thermistors attached to it to tell what temperature it is. And so then that heats up and you force the filament in there and it comes out the end of the little goopy spittle thing. Happy days. As part of that extruder, in my box of tricks, there's this piece, which is a little brass widget that has some little grooves cut in all the way around, and that's what grips onto the filament. And so a bearing pushes the filament up against that stuff, which then forces it into there, and it comes out there. So the next step is probably building the extruder, which will sit on top of here, and then the nozzle will poke down through this gap in there and print onto the bed. And I'm going to be printing the parts for the extruder on Tuesday, and hopefully shortly thereafter everything should be hunky-dory. Sweet. So I've made my extruder nozzle. That is the brass thing inside there. Well, it's steel actually. So there's a layer of capped-on tape, which is this stuff, very heat resistant, wrapped around the steel to insulate it, and then I put in one of those tiny sensors, and then I put another layer of tape over the top of that, and then I wrapped it in nichrome wire, 7 ohms worth, and I wrapped it round up, and then put another layer of tape, and then wrapped it back, and then I put another couple layers over the top to keep the heat in. And now I've got to crimp all these tiny little wires onto some bigger wires to go back to the microcontroller.